Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. On Fridays, we talk about the product owner role in Scrum. We talk about patterns and anti-patterns that relate to ours and the team's collaboration with the product owner. And we've also put together a course to help you navigate that relationship. There's 18 modules, nearly 8 hours of tools, techniques, videos, handouts, presentations you can use to help you and your team work better with your product owner. The course is available at bit.ly/coachyourPO. All lowercase, all one word. That's bit.ly/coachyourPO. And now, on to the show, the Product Owner Show. Hello everybody, welcome to our TGIF and Product Owner episode this week with Salvatore Rinaldo. Hey Salvatore, welcome back.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me.
So based on what we discussed yesterday in the Thursday episode, I'm really curious to what you're bringing to today's episode, the Product Owner episode. We'll start with a bad example so that we can end up on a high. So let's dive into it right away. What's potentially, Salvatore, the worst product owner anti-pattern you've witnessed in your career?
Well, the worst product owner anti-pattern I have witnessed is essentially a product owner who is not available to the team at all. Perhaps this product owner doesn't want to be a product owner, and you'll come across those cases, unfortunately. Perhaps this product owner is spending way too much time with stakeholders and with the rest of the organization, which is great, it's necessary, but it's only part of your job. The other part of your job should be to bring clarity and work with teams so that value is delivered, because that's ultimately what you want to get out of it. The worst product owner anti-pattern I've come across is therefore lack of communication, which goes hand in hand with lack of availability. So a product owner acting in such a way that essentially the team is starved for information. They don't know what good looks like. They don't know what customers need. And they are trying to keep busy on a daily basis. They're trying to come up with their own goals to try and have meaningful sprints, but there is no really a sense of direction. And that's because the product owner is not bringing that to the table. Now, because this product owner is not available, guess how much work he or she will do on the backlog?
Yeah, of course. So I'm guessing a lot, right?
A lot. Not so much. So I agree that obviously the whole team will own the backlog, but the product owner should really be there to prioritize the backlog and also bring clarity to why we're doing the work that we're doing, how these deliverables are linked to the wider business goals. And last not least, because these product owners are not available, they often can't take a business perspective on even technical things, even things that the team wants to do from a technical perspective, whether it's resolving technical debt or investing a bit of time in some testing and automation or a continuous delivery pipeline. If the product owner is not there, you're completely missing the business perspective and you can't build a holistic view.
I like that you said that you can't build a holistic view, because the product owner is, as a friend of mine once said, the hardest job in the world. Right? It's a little bit like a Superman or a Superwoman. Needs to be everywhere and be super fast and understand everything before anybody else does. So it's kind of a hard job to pull off successfully. And it's also a multifaceted, multidimensional role, right? Like, as you said, you need to bring in the business perspective to the team. Yesterday, we talked about how they become the chief clarity officer, right? Answering the questions from the teams. But you also need to understand enough of the technical context so that you can bring perspective to the questions the team has. And of course, the team has all of the technical context and none of the business context, or very little of it. And of course, for us, that means that we need to help the PO get there, right? Like, it's not an easy job. It requires effort, sometimes superhuman effort in many sides, technical, business, communication, organization, facilitation, patience. POs have to be very patient and so on. So how do you help these POs? Like, what are some of the tips you have for us on helping these POs that at least maybe when we start working with them, they might not be available?
Absolutely. So as a Scrum Master and coach, I think there are, well, two things mainly that I can suggest. The first one will be to try and mirror what is happening to the product owner, because one thing you shouldn't do as a Scrum Master is to assume that the system is clear to the product owner in the same way that it's clear to you, to yourself as a Scrum Master. These two jobs are quite different. We need to have a healthy tension between the two roles, but the two roles are still different, and they both have a very important function. We shouldn't therefore assume that product owners see what we see, because their focus might be elsewhere right now. They might have business pressures that we don't see. So the first piece of advice would be to mirror what you're saying. And the second one is to actually work with the product owner to realize that, perhaps we will do a better job at doing the things that the product owner wants to do and achieving the things that the product owner wants and needs to achieve for the organization if we set up a better team. And setting up a better team also goes through being more available to the team and bringing that level of clarity and focus. And we can do this in an empirical way. The product owner shouldn't have to just trust you because you're a Scrum Master. You can bring a bit of empiricism to the table and actually prove with data that behavioral change will lead to different results for the benefits of the product owner himself or herself.
Yeah, I really like that. Setting up the team to be better also means working with the PO, which in the latest Scrum Guide is part of the team. So that's progress. That's a great thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that one thing that helps us as Scrum Masters is also to be specific. Like, these are the things we expect the PO to do. Now, we know you can't do them all, at least not yet, but let's set expectations and what you can do now and what we are expecting the stakeholders and the team and the Scrum Master to pick up. Right? Because the PO will have to go through a transition. They can't go from being absent to being the super PO in one go, right? There's some steps to go there. So I wrote a sprint checklist. I'll put the link on the show notes so that people can go and download it. A sprint checklist that helps us to have that conversation, right? So that we tell the PO clearly what's expected, but also accept that they might not be able to fulfill all of those expectations. We just need to be explicit and deliberate about which ones we're going to fulfill now and which ones we're going to work on next, so that over time the PO can fulfill those expectations.
Absolutely. I think Management 3.0 once said delegation is a 7-step process. It's not a black and white process, right? So we can go through those 7 levels and actually do this in a systematic way.
Yeah, I'll put the link to the delegation poker as well.
Right. Thank you.
From Management 3.0. So now we turn our attention to the opposite, the mirror image of this, what might have been potentially the best product owner you've ever worked with. Describe them for us.
So I have 2 product owners in mind right now. I was very, very lucky to work with them. I was very fond of them too. It was fun to work with them. So the ideal product owner I have in mind is someone who is able to influence the team without coming across as the boss. Right? So the team doesn't perceive the product owner as the boss, as a manager, as someone who is actually measuring you for performance, but somehow this product owner is bringing value to the team in a way that the team themselves want to work with him or her without feeling threatened by him. So good product owners take what they do very seriously, but they don't take themselves too seriously. Yeah. Very good product owners, in my opinion, find a very good balance between giving enough information, enough context around decisions being made without overloading the team with information. Sometimes we tend to communicate way too much. So while I think that it's an essential part of the job, I also think that product owners shouldn't necessarily share everything that they know and that's going on in their heads, but share the context around the decisions that are being made. Because once the why is clear, then you don't need to spend 24/7 with your team, and you'll enable your team to make the right decisions without you. So the product owners that I have in mind, especially 2 that I worked with in the past, are also very good at simplifying things. We know that product owner is a very hard role, but a good product owner needs to say no a lot. needs to linearize complexity as much as possible. There's a lot of chaos happening behind the scenes, but by the time the team knows about the work that needs to be done, this work looks linear, simple, well-defined. At least the purpose of the work needs to be clear.
Yeah, at least the purpose of the work. I think that's a great addition.
And how to measure success.
Because sometimes the product owner will have enough understanding of the product in order to tell the team what a solution could look like. And other times the product owner might not be able to say that, but they might be very good at describing what the customer goal is and why that is important and what is the challenge, the current challenge or obstacle the customer has to reach that goal, right? And then the team can come in and bring their solution ideas without having the PO to do that themselves.
Absolutely, 100%. One last aspect I will bring to the table, in my opinion, is that very good product owners, they cut features out from time to time. They simplify their product, even behind the scenes.
You mean features that were already implemented, they take them out, right?
Correct. Absolutely. If that's appropriate, if that makes sense for the customer, if data shows that these features are not being used as much as you thought they would be, for example, you take them out, and that's absolutely fine. Good product owners look at products holistically. They look at a code base and they're like, look, we have a bunch of features that are not being used, but there is code behind these features that needs to be maintained. Why don't we take these features out? So we end up with less code, less maintenance, less opportunity for bugs. And so they have a holistic view of what they're doing. They are entrepreneurs with a technical mindset, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way to put it. One tool that I've used in the past to help product owners get to that decision of what to take out, even after it was implemented, so not just from the backlog, from the product itself, is this idea of a kill criteria, which is, if a feature does not deliver a certain performance, it gets taken out, right? Like we used to call it a feature. Every feature has to pay for itself. And of course, we would define what that meant in the context. And if the feature does not pay for itself, then it should be removed. Do you have tips on how to make that call? Because taking something out can be very hard for a product owner to do.
That's very true. Well, in economic terms, the long-term value brought by customer adoption around a certain feature has to be much larger than building the feature and making the customer adopt the feature in the first place. This is not the case, by the way. I know it sounds obvious, but it's really not the case. If you're working on for example, in a startup and you have a new platform, you could see that the cost of adopting new features or the cost of setting up the service for a new customer can actually be quite large. There needs to be a lot of focus and attention on automation, on customer support, on things that will make this customer adoption as cheap as possible. So yes, the long-term value needs to be much, much larger than the customer adoption of the feature in the first place. But also, this is a quantitative way to go about it, but we should also look at customer feedback. We're very lucky these days that everything we do is connected, and through online and digital media channels, we can get lots of feedback from real customers about how happy they are with our product and features. We all know that when developing digital products, for example, we shouldn't try and make them too complicated, because at the end of the day, on average, customers will only use 25% of your feature set. So for a product owner, try to figure out what this 25% is for your product and try and take out everything else potentially.
Yeah, absolutely, which will make the life of the team much easier. Salvatore, thank you very much for sharing all of those insights and knowledge with us. We're close to the end, but before we go, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Well, connect with me on LinkedIn for sure. And you'll probably see some talks that I've given on YouTube. So you're very welcome to check them out if you're interested. I'm very active in the community here in London. So now that, well, I don't want to say it too loud, but now that the pandemic seems to be giving us a break, we might be able to meet in person in one of our Agile meetups here in London.
Absolutely. And be sure to, of course, reach out to Salvatore, ask a few follow-up questions and connect on LinkedIn. Salvatore, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much for joining us and for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
My pleasure. And thank you very much.
One more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over, but there's a lot more we have to share.
we have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast hosts, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. Join us at scrummastertoolbox.com/podcast and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more week full of Scrum Master tips and tricks.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.